What if I told you that almost 40% of what's inside your peanut butter jar isn't peanuts at all? That the spread you trust for your morning toast might be padded with sweeteners, oils, and stabilizers instead of the simple roasted peanuts you imagine? For years, that familiar jar sat in our kitchens as a symbol of comfort. Smooth or crunchy, lightly salted or sweet, it tasted like childhood. But somewhere along the way, things changed. Some brands have trimmed down the peanut content and filled the gap with sugar, corn syrup solids, hydrogenated oils, and protein powders. The label still whispers peanut butter, but the fine print tells a very different story. If you open a jar and never see oil settling on top, if sugar shows up before peanuts on the ingredient list, chances are you're holding a product built for shelf life, not authenticity. Let's look at one example, a jar that promises peanuts but delivers something else entirely. Jif Reduced Fat Creamy Peanut Butter Spread. At first glance, it looks innocent. Reduced fat feels safe, even healthy, like a lighter version of the peanut butter you grew up with. But a closer look exposes the real change. It's not the fat they reduced, it's the peanuts. Hidden in small print, Jif admits this jar contains just 60% peanuts, far from the 90% minimum the FDA requires to call anything peanut butter. That's why this product is labeled a spread. It's a carefully engineered replica. The rest is an assortment of corn syrup solids, added sugar, pea protein, and hydrogenated oils, all blended to create a texture that never changes. Twist open the lid, and the illusion begins. Real peanut butter has that thin layer of golden oil on top, a sign of natural separation. This jar, however, is smooth and perfectly uniform, like it was cast from a mold. Leave it open for a month, and it'll look exactly the same. That's not freshness, that's manufacturing. Scoop a spoon through it, and the difference becomes impossible to ignore. Natural peanut butter feels dense and alive. It resists, clings, and reminds you it came from real nuts. The reduced fat spread, on the other hand, glides like whipped frosting. It's airy, almost mousse-like, too perfect for comfort. Taste it, and the sweetness arrives before the peanut flavor. The familiar roasted depth is missing. What lingers is a sugary aftertaste and a faint dryness, the kind you get from processed snacks, not whole foods. Spread it on toast and it behaves like icing, smooth and obedient. No texture, no grip. Real peanut butter leaves streaks, pulls at the bread, and carries the rustic unevenness of something genuine. This version looks flawless but feels empty. Even the smell gives it away. Instead of that warm, nutty aroma you expect, the first note is sweetness, like candy batter, with only a hint of peanuts hiding underneath. And this is where the disappointment sets in. Jif isn't just a product. For many, it's a piece of their childhood. Since 1958, the brand built itself on trust and convenience. Creamy, consistent, always ready to spread, no stirring required. But that convenience came with trade-offs, slowly shifting the product further away from what peanut butter is supposed to be. The reduced fat version is simply the next step on that path. More control, more sweetness, more stability, and fewer real peanuts. You open a jar today expecting the flavor you remember, the Sunday toast, the after-school sandwiches. But instead, you find something too smooth, too predictable, too engineered. And that perfect consistency suddenly feels wrong. It's nostalgia with a crack in it. The moment you realize the peanut butter you trusted quietly changed when you weren't looking. Now comes the moment of clarity, the part where you turn the jar around and read what's actually inside. Instead of simple roasted peanuts, you find corn syrup solids, added sugar, hydrogenated oils, and a list of vitamins and minerals included not for nourishment, but to patch the nutritional gaps created when the peanuts were taken out. Even the phrase reduced fat feels like a clever distraction. The fat that's missing isn't junk, it's natural peanut oil, rich in heart-friendly unsaturated fats. And what steps in to replace it? Carbs, sweeteners, and emulsifiers. It's a clever shuffle that lets the product appear healthier without truly being healthier. You can't help but feel misled. You paid for peanuts and got a formulation. You expected something familiar and comforting, but received a carefully crafted recipe instead. It's not dangerous, illegal, or harmful. It's just undeniably engineered. Everything looks normal, tastes somewhat familiar, spreads just the way you expect. Yet deep down, you sense that the soul of the food has been replaced by strategy. And that's the ache behind the disappointment. The everyday quirks we once accepted, the oily layer that rose to the top, the uneven texture, the need to stir, were actually signs of authenticity. Today, those natural qualities are treated like flaws that need fixing. Reduced fat sounds modern and smart, but at its core, it's about standardizing a food that was never meant to be perfect. It's about removing the natural character of peanuts so the jar can sit on a shelf indefinitely, looking flawless. When a trusted brand trims real peanuts to reduce fat, it's not improving the food, it's rewriting the meaning of what it is. And maybe the real concern isn't how many peanuts are missing, but how much trust is slipping away. Skippy reduced fat. The familiar blue lid, the bright logo, the jar that has lived in countless kitchens for decades. But the fine print tells the same story as Jif's reduced fat version. Skippy reduced fat is also just 60% peanuts. The rest is there not to enhance flavor, but to fill the space left behind. Skippy built its identity on smoothness. When it arrived in 1932, the promise was simple. Make peanut butter creamy, consistent, and comforting. Families loved that reliability, and the brand carried that legacy for generations. But this reduced-fat version shifts away from what people believe they're buying. Most shoppers assume that reducing fat in peanut butter means making it healthier or lowering calories. What they don't realize is that peanut fat is largely the good kind, monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fats that support heart health, stabilize cholesterol, and provide steady energy. Nutrition experts often recommend natural peanut butter precisely because of these fats. So when a jar advertises less fat, what it's really offering is fewer peanuts. And when peanuts are reduced, something else has to fill the gap. In this jar, that something else is a calculated mix of corn syrup solids, sugar, pea protein, and hydrogenated vegetable oils. None of these ingredients are illegal or inherently harmful, but they shift the product away from what most people think they're eating. Corn syrup solids and sugar push the carbohydrate content higher. Research consistently shows that diets rich in fast-absorbing carbs can raise triglycerides and strain the body's insulin response. Not enough to make one sandwich harmful, but enough to change how this food behaves in your daily diet. Then come the hydrogenated oils. They keep the spread silky, stable, and perfectly smooth. No oil separation, no stirring, no mess. But they also add saturated fat, the type health organizations advise limiting because of its link to elevated LDL cholesterol. It's added to recreate the thickness that natural peanut oil would normally provide. Only now the thickness comes from chemistry, not peanuts. Dietitian Sarah Haas put it plainly. The creamy, sweet peanut butter of my childhood had added sugar and hydrogenated oils, which can be damaging to our health in excess. She wasn't singling out Skippy, but her point fits perfectly when you see those same ingredients in what should be a simple nut butter. Even the protein isn't entirely peanut-derived. Some of it is pea protein isolate, included to keep the nutrition label looking balanced after reducing real nuts. There's nothing wrong with pea protein, but it's another reminder, this isn't peanut butter built from peanuts. It's peanut butter reconstructed. And maybe that's the part that stings the most. You expect a food made from something whole and simple. You expect a straightforward ingredient. But instead, what you get is a reconstructed version. Sweeteners for taste, added proteins for thickness, oils to keep everything in place. It isn't harmful, but it isn't the food you believed you were buying. And that quiet disappointment hits deeper than you expect. You pick up the same jar you've trusted since childhood, assuming it still holds the same comfort. But once you learn what reduced fat really means, you see how far the product has drifted from the wholesome version you remember. When the peanut content drops, your relationship with the jar changes. What was once a grounding, natural food becomes something managed and fine-tuned, shaped more by cost and convenience than by peanuts. The smoothness you used to admire suddenly feels like a crafted effect rather than a natural quality. So here's the simple truth. If you want peanut butter for health, skip the reduced fat section. Read the ingredient list. Choose jars that rely on peanuts and maybe a touch of salt, nothing more. The fewer ingredients, the closer it is to the real food your body expects. Skippy will always have a place in American kitchens, but this particular version isn't the one that built that loyalty. And once you understand what's inside, you realize your body deserves something closer to real peanuts, not a compromise presented as an upgrade. 3. Peter Pan Reduced Fat Peanut Spread. Peter Pan doesn't try to disguise things with complicated wording. It puts the truth right on the front. Peanut spread, not peanut butter. And that one small phrase says more than most shoppers notice. This product doesn't meet the FDA requirement of 90% peanuts, the cutoff that separates real peanut butter from everything else. Fall below that threshold, and the name changes, the formula shifts, and so does the story behind the jar. Peter Pan Reduced Fat sits firmly in that category because much of its peanut content has been swapped out for other ingredients: corn syrup solids, soy protein concentrate, added sugar, hydrogenated oils, and stabilizers that rebuild the creaminess real peanuts naturally provide. On the production line, the process becomes obvious. Peanut content is scaled back in the mixer, not entirely removed, just reduced enough to stretch the batch. Corn syrup solids step in to replace volume so fewer peanuts are needed. Soy protein thickens the mixture to imitate the density of real nuts. Hydrogenated oils keep the texture smooth and prevent natural separation. And near the end, a sprinkle of added vitamins finishes the formula, more for presentation than for actual nutrition. None of these moves violate rules, and none of them are unusual, but each substitution is intentional. Every swapped ingredient is chosen because it's cheaper, more stable, and easier to control than peanuts. The jar becomes less like a natural food and more like a carefully engineered product. And from a business standpoint, that efficiency is valuable. Using fillers and stabilizers cuts costs. It boosts output because sweeteners weigh less and stretch further. It reduces dependence on seasonal peanut harvests, making production smoother. Hydrogenated oils extend shelf life dramatically, lowering shipping losses and spoilage. In a national market where margins are tight, stability is everything. But that stability comes with a hidden trade-off. To boost volume and reduce costs, something had to shrink. And that something was the peanuts themselves. Once the core ingredient was scaled down, the brand leaned on nostalgia to keep customers loyal. The cheerful mascot, the bright colors, the familiar branding, all of it acts as emotional reassurance. Even the phrase reduced fat works as a kind of shield, implying improvement rather than substitution. The jar looks comforting enough that most shoppers never pause to notice the difference between peanut butter and peanut spread. That's the subtle art of modern packaging. It's not deception, it's design. The product evolves quietly while the branding stays the same. People buy what they remember, not necessarily what's in the jar today. And once you recognize that pattern, you understand that this jar isn't the exception. It's a snapshot of how the modern food system works. Today's food industry runs on three things: speed, scale, and predictability. Whole ingredients move slowly, cost more, and change with the seasons. But engineered ingredients? They behave the same way every hour of every day. They slide smoothly into global supply chains, fit neatly into budgets, and keep factories humming without interruption. In a world like that, simplicity stops being an advantage. Efficiency becomes the new recipe. And suddenly, you understand how peanut butter gradually turned into peanut spread. Not because someone wanted to trick us, but because the math pushed it there. The system rewards products that stay stable, store well, and survive long shipping journeys. Somewhere along the way, the taste of childhood gets stretched, diluted, and streamlined. And then comes the moment that makes it personal. A little boy sits at the kitchen table, warm toast in front of him. His mother hands him the familiar jar, the one she remembers from her own childhood. He spreads the peanut spread, takes a bite, chews once, and his expression sinks. He pushes the plate away. Confused, she tries a taste herself. She remembers something deeper, richer, more comforting. She turns the jar in her hands and notices the tiny phrase she's never paid attention to: peanut spread. She exhales, not angry, but quietly disappointed. Somewhere between her memories and the present, the flavor faded. And for the first time, she wonders whether the product changed or whether she stopped paying attention. 4. Great Value Peanut Butter Spread. When something carries the name Great Value, it begs a simple question. Are we saving money or sacrificing quality? That question sits quietly behind every jar of Walmart's Great Value Peanut Butter Spread. And the moment you check the label, the reason for the low price becomes clear. This isn't peanut butter. Legally, it can't be. Real peanut butter must contain at least 90% peanuts. Great Value falls short, so it gets the title Peanut Butter Spread. And when a brand switches to that word, it usually signals one thing: the costly ingredient has been trimmed down, and cheaper ones have taken its place. Inside the production line, the transformation starts early. Peanut content gets reduced to cut raw material costs. Then maltodextrin, a fine, almost invisible powder, increases the batch volume. Hydrogenated oils replace natural peanut oil to keep the spread thick and stable even with fewer nuts. Sugar and sweeteners fill the flavor gap left behind. And at the end, a dash of artificial flavor brings back a hint of that roasted peanut aroma, the kind you'd expect naturally from real peanuts. Nothing about this process breaks rules. Nothing is scandalous. But every step tells a simple truth. Reduce what's expensive. Increase what isn't. Keep the jar cheap. And you can taste that truth. Real peanut butter feels weighty. It clings to your mouth. It has that slow-building roasted richness that lingers. Great Value's peanut spread tastes softer, sweeter, and thinner. The peanut flavor sits on the surface without ever deepening. The aftertaste slips away quickly, replaced by a sugary finish. If real peanut butter feels like an honest food, this feels like a photocopy, close enough to resemble the original, but never close enough to fully satisfy. Nutrition experts have warned about this for years. Dietitian Cynthia Sass notes that many low-cost spreads rely on added sugars and stabilizers that dilute the nutritional benefits of peanuts. Another expert, Maggie McClellan, reminds us that the fewer the ingredients, the closer you get to real peanut butter. And when you glance at this ingredient list, full of powders, oils, and additives, you instantly understand what they mean. But here's the gentle truth. Most of us don't stop to think about any of that. We notice the price. We recognize the colors. We see the word value and convince ourselves we made the smart choice. We tell ourselves peanut butter is peanut butter. We tell ourselves it's fine. And that's exactly why this jar keeps selling. It fits the mindset we fall into when grocery bills climb higher. But food isn't magic. A low price always comes from somewhere. And in this jar, it comes from the peanuts, the very ingredient that defines the product. The more often we reach for the cheapest version, the more the market learns to deliver cheaper versions. The system follows our habits. When customers demand low prices above all else, companies start designing food around low prices, even if it means replacing the real thing with something that only looks like it. As the years pass, the baseline keeps slipping. What once felt like the real thing slowly becomes a luxury, while the watered-down version quietly becomes the norm. Great value isn't the villain of the story, it's more like a reflection. It shows us how modern food evolves based on our buying habits, and how rarely we stop to notice what we're actually choosing. Sometimes the jar saves us a bit of money, sometimes it takes away more than we realize. And that circles back to the original question, what are we really saving? Price isn't the only version of value. Taste matters, quality matters, trust matters. And when those fade, even the cheapest jar can feel like an unfair trade. That's the small truth this product leaves behind. A low price can feel satisfying, but not everything we save at checkout is worth losing inside the jar. 5. Reese's Peanut Butter Spread. Reese's Peanut Butter Spread is honest in its own way. The label openly lists added sugar, flavoring, stabilizers, and hydrogenated oils, ingredients that push it far away from the simplicity of real peanut butter. And once you see that, the rest becomes clear. This jar is built to taste like candy, not peanuts. The brand relies heavily on nostalgia. One look at the bright orange label and your mind jumps straight to the classic Reese's cup, that salty, sweet bite you grew up loving. And that expectation is the hook. Before you even twist the lid, you assume it will be delicious, comforting, familiar. But this is where the formula takes a sharp turn. Inside the manufacturing line, the goal isn't to create peanut butter, it's to recreate the joy of a candy filling. Sweetness becomes the centerpiece. Sugar and enhancers drive the flavor. Hydrogenated oils give it that thick, candy-like smoothness. Peanuts are included, but they're no longer the star. Artificial flavors are added at the end to recreate the iconic Reese's aroma, even though the roasted peanut base is lighter than most people expect. So the taste hits fast, sweet, bold, and fun, but shallow. The peanut character is faint. It doesn't warm up or deepen the way real roasted nuts do. Instead, the sweetness takes over, followed by a glossy finish from the oils. Compared side by side with a simple peanut and salt spread, the difference is striking. One feels natural and hearty, the other feels more like dessert, enjoyable, but missing the soul of real peanuts. Customers have noticed this too. Common comments include, tasty, but nowhere close to peanut butter. More like a dessert spread than a nut spread. My kids love it, but the peanut flavor is barely there. Good for snacks, not for real sandwiches. These reactions reveal a quiet truth. People can tell when flavor takes priority over substance. They recognize when sweetness replaces depth, when nostalgia replaces authenticity. Some go further. Wanted Reese's taste, got sugar paste instead. Nice, but not something I'd buy as peanut butter. And that's the real conflict. It tastes good, but only because it behaves like candy. That enjoyment can hide how much of the jar is built from additives rather than nuts. This leads to a bigger realization. We're naturally drawn to excitement. When something smells familiar or tastes bold, we accept it without much thought. We trust the branding. We trust the color. We trust the memories the product triggers. It's easy to assume that anything carrying the Reese's name must be rich in peanuts. But when you pause and look past the label, the gap becomes obvious. One product is grounded in a simple ingredient. The other is built around engineered flavor. And that brings us to the heart of the matter. We like to believe we make thoughtful choices when we shop, but spreads like this show how easily sweetness can steer us, how quickly nostalgia can influence a purchase, and how rarely we ask the simplest question: what is this actually made of? This isn't about pointing fingers. It's about seeing the pattern for what it is. When a candy brand steps into the peanut butter aisle, the product naturally follows candy rules: sweet, creamy, and instantly rewarding. There's nothing wrong with enjoying that, but it helps to be clear about what you're actually buying. If you're looking for richness, warmth, and the full flavor of roasted peanuts, this jar won't deliver that. It will give you sweetness, it will give you fun, but it won't give you the peanut butter you thought you were choosing. And here's the thought that stays long after the sweetness fades: the peanuts were never meant to be the star. Peanut butter used to be straightforward. Peanuts, maybe a pinch of salt, and an honest flavor that spoke for itself. But over time, the jars changed. Some were diluted, some were sweetened, some were built from oils, thickeners, and powders. And because the packaging stayed friendly and the price stayed low, we didn't really notice. This isn't about fear, it's about awareness. Once you understand what's actually in the jar, you can make clearer choices. You can choose the brands that still honor real ingredients. You can understand why some jars cost a little more and why others feel suspiciously cheap. So next time you're standing in that aisle, maybe you'll slow down. Maybe you'll read the ingredients. Maybe you'll look beyond the familiar logo. And you'll remember that the best peanut butter is the one that still respects the peanut. This video is not meant to divide or persuade. It's meant to spark reflection, conversation, and understanding based on everyday choices and current trends. We fully support the U.S. Constitution and all federal guidelines. If today's breakdown resonated with you, drop your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and tap the bell so you never miss our next independent deep dive.